We've had a couple of rather big hitters to kick off the Game Boy Color library, with Dragon Warrior Monsters and Wario Land 2, two beasts of their respective genres that got us underway nicely. Before we get to an entry in what is arguably the biggest of all Game Boy hitters with the next review, let's look at one of the GBC's first entries into the puzzle genre, a style of gameplay that boasted tons of excellent titles in the original GB library. The best 1v1 board games out there have one or two things in common: a simple rule set accessible to all, and a skill curve that'll take time to master as you start to figure out the nuances and intricacies. As to the first part, you'd have trouble finding a simpler set of boundaries than you'll see in Hexcite. Both players have a bunch of tiles, 3, 4 or 6-sided blocks made up of smaller triangle shapes, and you take it in turns to place them into this hexagonal board layout somewhere. Placing one of your tiles successfully earns you points based on how many sides, either the edges of the hexagons or other pieces, you manage to touch. Note you can't place a piece in such a way that it'd only cover half of a side of a pre-existing tile. You have to match the sides of the two pieces in their entirety. This board has 6 large outer hexagon zones surrounding a 7th central one. The player who manages to place the final piece to complete one of these zones gets some bonus points. If at the end of the round you still have tiles that you've not managed to lay down, they'll lose you points. As for video game board games, something else is a prerequisite. The AI you're up against needs to be programmed well enough to simulate a human opponent. It doesn't hurt if their intelligence level increases as you get deeper into the game as well. Full marks as to that with Hexcite. While early computer players are somewhat predictable and manipulable after a few goes, they do get quite clever later on, anticipating your moves and laying traps for several turns ahead. Of course, as you'd expect, this game is certainly more fun against a human opponent, and with regards to that you have two options. Handing off the console in between moves is available as a choice, but because the moves take seconds, you'll be doing that a lot. Of course, for the other option you'll need a link cable and 2 copies of the game. And a friend, of course, which is where I often stumble on that front. With only one board layout, you might wonder what the lasting appeal might be here, and while that is true of a lot of classic board games, if the game doesn't grab you at first, there's a reasonable chance it never will. But if you are drawn in by the simplicity of the whole thing, then the accessibility of the rule set might well be what you're looking for. The tile allocations at the start of each round are randomized too, which adds a little bit of variation, I guess. Don't sleep on the practice mode either, by the way. This isn't so much a training program as a series of 50 unique puzzles whereby you'll need to figure out how to win within a certain number of moves. Tying isn't enough, you need to beat the score by at least 5 points to move to the next level. A nice addition. With a Japan-exclusive Game Boy Advance sequel and a few other console PC versions scattered about, there aren't a great many options for Western players to have a go on Hexcite. Not sure how much of a problem that is. There are, for sure, more captivating puzzlers out there, but for what it's worth, this ain't half bad, really.